Go ahead, James. You can kick it off if you like.
Oh, thank you, Kurt. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. So I want to welcome everybody to the July 13th meeting of the Ad Hoc Property Committee meeting. Basically, this committee was put together Dennis, did I say it wrong?
It's Sovany.
Sovany.
I'll just start that off for the record.
Sorry. All right. Rewind. Betty Sovany, Dennis Stedman, Fred Childs, and James, I believe it's Nice.
Nice.
0 for 2. So, I just want to start the meeting by saying I appreciate you guys coming on to this and taking it on. I know it's a huge undertaking by everybody. Fred and I will be serving as the liaisons, back to the Board of Supervisors. And, at this time, I guess, Kurt, what's the best way? Should we start with a particular order of how we want to look at properties, or?
Well, how about this? Why don't I start very basic here? Recognizing, I think everyone recognizes we already have another meeting scheduled for August 5th. We will start having other staff come in to start providing some information. But what I thought was, if you don't mind, James, I'm going to share my screen here for 1 second. Okay.
Sure.
Here we go. Give me 1 second. So if everybody can see this, I just want to start to make sure we go through these things. So versus all of the whereases that lawyers love to help us write, I want to go down to the now therefore be it resolved, right? So if we look at the task of the committee, right, to identify, assess, and analyze township property as directed by the Board of Supervisors. So today, and we will make this public, we provided to all of you to Mr. Child's email, which was appreciated about opening it. There are township properties that we have that we've identified. And one of the links that you all got was basically every scrap of information that we had. And in some of those reports, you'll see properties like the township building, the pole barn that the Public Works Department stores equipment in, and a variety of others that I think the board and the staff that was reporting to the board felt that would fall outside the purview of this committee. So you do have 2 things that arrived in your email today, which were updates that staff had made over the last 6 months or so regarding the properties, the golf course house, the properties at Patterson Farm, to outline that those would be the ones to evaluate. Now, if in looking over these reports, I think everyone on the board, having spoken with them and staff, if you all felt strongly that there was another property that was not referenced in terms of being a priority and you felt differently, I think the 2 liaisons would be certainly willing to listen to those discussions. Item number 2, to identify potential uses or reuses of the property. I think the discussion all along has been, if we have 15 or 20 properties that we're looking at, it's not just, you'll see that we've basically put together an analysis of what it would cost to rehabilitate them, to make them, at least my words here, habitable or usable, but not necessarily rentable or even sellable, if that was something that the committee wanted to evaluate. So what we believe could be how those properties could be marketed, could be used. And probably at our next meeting, I think we'll have our planning director, Jim Majewski, come in to present to all of you what the current zoning is for those properties, meaning, what is currently permitted or allowed. If the committee in discussions felt that there were uses that fell outside that zoning, one of those recommendations from a report could be to amend the zoning or to create an overlay district or to do things to accommodate a broader array of uses if the committee felt that be necessary. Item number 3, to basically examine in the end if there were, based upon the recommendations of the committee, it may be that the base level of rehabilitation that we had come up with would need to be changed to accommodate a specific use or type of use that the committee would like to see. Number 4, a financial review and analysis, basically, of not just rehabilitation costs, but what those revenue opportunities could be with potential clients. And you'll see even here where I mentioned this before, even examining if the committee felt there was, it would merit consideration to sell any of those properties. And then in an outline of those properties, those that the committee feels that the board should give top priority to. And that could be any number of categories. That could be based upon something that could be most reasonably or easily done, properties that you feel that are in the state that need to be done for that reason, a reuse or a development opportunity with the business that could be timely, that we should be focused on. I don't think there's any set criteria for that. So in the end, that was the provision by which we outlined this. Now, again, those were basic parameters and resolution that if the committee felt something different needed to be considered or contemplated, I think it's why you have 2 board members here for that discussion. As I said, we did distribute those property lists, and the one link that you'll see, which is from Google Drive, has studies that go back, 10 years or more. Not that you could, if you were really committed, go through all of those things. But I think the goal, Mr. Majewski put that together, and that originally went to the board, was to give as much context as possible for what's been done in the past. Now, give me one more second here. One more second, I'm sorry. Oh, I don't have that there. Hold on, my apologies. So now, did you all hopefully receive the agenda from our first agenda from Katie today, right? So if we're looking at, excuse me, if we're looking at, where's my, give me this, I'm sorry. Right. So if we're sitting here and talking about those property lists, one of the things that Mr. Majewski felt could be helpful to the committee would be when you look at that list, you'll see the list of the ones that the board had recommended. If any of you would like to go see these properties, we have multiple staff members, our public works director, our planning director, Mr. Majewski, that can certainly take you all around individually or in groups to meet on site at particular times that would be convenient to look at any of these properties that if you felt that that would give you more context. We do have, the board will be having next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, another interview for another member of this committee that has expressed interest. I apologize, I can't say that person's name off the top of my head. So if that goes well, we'd be welcoming a 5th member of the committee, presumably by the time of our next meeting. Is there any questions just based on that cursory amount of information?
Kurt, you mentioned that there is a list from the supervisors of the properties that they wanted to focus on. Is that in the documents that were sent, or?
So the second email that you have, yeah, so you have 2 so the second email that came from Katie, the first one basically had the 2 links, and I know you couldn't open the one of them and it was resent. The second email from Katie included a PDF document that lists the various properties on Patterson Farm. And then the second document, which is from Remington Vernick, the one that, it's a lengthy document, but it looked at a handful of properties. It would have been those listings from those 2 documents. And I'm going to say it's around 20 properties or so that would comprise the recommended list from the board. And what we'll do is, coming into the next meeting, when Mr. Majewski will be talking or presenting, we'll come up with just like a bulleted list, you know what I mean, that we can refer to, that we can, you know, there's all these different names for these properties that a lot use interchangeably. that we can have. So that way, if they're being referenced, you all can have them as a, just as a reference point to, we can keep track of what these are. So, but those are in that one email that was sent.
So Kurt, the list of properties on Patterson Farm is clear and crisp. The second list that you're referring to is the 80 some page document.
Yeah.
And somewhere, because I haven't gone through that last 15 minutes, but somewhere in there is another dozen.
Not that many. So what you'll find is, and I say this halfway joking, but Mr. Stedman, I don't know what your occupation is. The second document that you have is from our engineer. And if you know anything about engineers, I'm not sure how I ever lived before. I was introduced to lawyers and engineers, right? So that 89-page report is not about 12 properties or so. I think it might be 5 or so. And so this is just so you understand the difference. The PDF that was holding up, right? That's just a summary list of properties. So what happened is a number of years ago, the township had gone through and put cost estimates together to rehabilitate those properties. Our planning director, Mr. Majewski, went and looked back at those properties again to make sure there was no significant changes. And he updated those estimated rehabilitation costs with inflation. The properties in the Remington-Vernick report, and you'll keep hearing me say Andy, and you're going to meet him. Andy's going to be in one of these meetings, were properties that we had never looked at all. So I had asked the engineers to go in and assess those half a dozen properties or so. And so you've got the full report of the nuts and bolts of everything they looked at in that analysis. That's why it is so much more detailed than the other one that Bet held up. That's just like a laundry dollar amount. So I wouldn't, if you want, you can read that whole report. But I think if you filter through that, you'll find the properties and the cost estimates on it. But
I think I'm looking at this long PDF, the 80-something page one, and the executive summary lists 5 separate buildings, I think. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right, James. And so go ahead.
Is it those 5? Is it those 5 plus the list?
Yes, those 5 plus the one Bet was handing up. So
thank you. Okay.
Bet, I'm sorry. So I don't keep winging it here. How many are listed on that sheet, that front and back that you held up there?
You have 10, and then there's a separate cost listing for the Satterthwaite House.
Yeah, so
remediation and environmental remediation.
So if you add those all together, we're talking like 16 properties. Then is what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, so we're going to bring all of these staff members in for discussions, for overview, to help give you all context and options. And the other good news is we have Andy and Jim and I as well look at different grant possibilities. So when you guys are even contemplating things, we also are funding cycles of various mostly matching grant opportunities. There's where we're doing 50-50. So we can start to identify even what could be some funding sources for some of these properties that we'd be looking at. But frankly, I think the work of the committee, in my opinion, where there's going to be probably some of the most, the discussion that will not necessarily have the clearest direction is going to be reuse of that property. And, you'll have zoning overviews in terms of what's allowed. But that's always the $1 million question, right? We can sit and think that anything could go in there, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean we attract that particular use. So I think that discussion of relevance, it's what I always describe as the difference between visioning and hallucinating, right? So what can we do with these properties? So I think those will be the hardest discussions, and we'll have staff here to guide what those possibilities could be. Even in the enabling resolution that we had, I think the hope is that we get someone with a real estate background. Fortunately, you have a liaison who has a lot of experience in properties and appraisals and things that we'll just have to make sure he shows up for every meeting to give his insights. So no pressure there, James. So
None at all. None at all.
but hey, listen, and I'll say this for the committee. This is going to be your committee. If you all think, if any of you know people who are developing property or realtors that you want to invite to these meetings to give insights and ask for their opinions, ask for their insights about what their clients are looking for, I think we can make outreach to people who do that if they'd be willing to give some time to give their insights to you as well. So I don't know, is there any other questions from that?
Not a specific question. I think one thing that would be useful in this initial meeting would be to have the members have the opportunity to introduce themselves. I don't know the other committee members. So I think if we're going to be working together to sort out some problems, just a little intro might be useful. That's all right.
Dennis, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Dennis Stedman, been in Lower Makefield Township for 34 years as of a couple weeks ago. Retired CEO in pharmaceutical industry. Trained as an economist. Born and raised on a dairy farm. Have a lot of love of land and agriculture. Been involved in a lot of real estate transactions, both commercial, business side and private residential side. Love Lower Makefield, and I serve on the Farmland Preservation Committee. And when this opportunity came up, I just thought it would be good opportunity to maybe contribute something. We have some great properties in Lower Makefield. I'd love to see them be put to better use.
Dennis, if you don't mind me asking, where did you grow up on a dairy farm at?
Up in northwestern Pennsylvania, up next to Lake Erie, up in Erie County, about 2 hours north of Pittsburgh. Dirt road, always waved to any car that went by because you had to know.
So I grew up on a dairy farm on right outside of Meadville, Pennsylvania, between Meadville and Conneaut Lake, and my grandfather.
Oh, I know where Meadville is. I was out in Edinburgh, and I'm sure you know where Edinburgh is.
My mother lives in Linesville, so yes, I know Edinburgh.
Well, there you go. Okay.
So look, I like you even more now. If you're a Steeler fan, then you good. So
well, now let's not go too far.
All right, let's move on to Fred Childs now.
Yes.
Fred, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, James. My wife and I have lived here just over about 24 years in Yardley Hunt. Enjoyed it immensely so far, and been involved with the Financial Advisory Committee, which has kind of gone in limbo since we don't have a quorum members for now. Retired a couple years ago from operations and maintenance in public transit, some supervisory and management positions, and prior to that, project management for large-scale projects for freight and passenger rail, public transit, light rail, and so on through Philadelphia and New York, New Jersey.
Excellent. Thank you. And I want to thank Dennis, because I get to say thanks, but thanks again for volunteering for this. Fred, obviously, thanks for volunteering for this. Betty, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Bet Sovany, and I come to this, well, I've been 40 years in Lower Makefield Township with my husband. We have 2 grown kids now, and have a background in environmental planning and design, 33 years with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the last half of which I was the training manager for the agency. And most of the time on the other part, I was in various media programs, spent a lot of time with the Superfund program. So I've got all that. Then I retired and got this nice job as the coordinator for AOI Arts Center. which of course is on the Patterson farm. And found out about this committee and having lots of ideas and possibilities and things I thought I could bring to the committee as well. Threw my hat in. So that's where I come from.
Pleasure, and thank you again for volunteering. We really do appreciate it. And last but not least, James.
Hi everyone, I'm James Nyes. I'm on the Historic Commission. I've been there since October of last year, and I have lived in Lower Makefield for most of my life. I just graduated in May from the University of Pennsylvania, and I am excited to offer my perspective. That of the Historic Commission. I'm very interested in local history and as well as preserving it and bringing it into the future. So I think I can offer a unique perspective for this committee that way.
Appreciate it, and thank you again for volunteering for it. So I guess, Kurt, if there's any other township points that you have at this time, I guess not. I'm looking at the agenda. It looks like we need to start forming some type of chair and vice chair on the committee. So I'll let the members take over that. If anybody wants to nominate somebody as chair, vice chair, so on and so forth, but we'll start with the chair. So if anybody wants to nominate somebody, have at it. Unfortunately, I can't, and Fred and I and Kurt can't nominate anybody, so it has to be one of you four.
Dennis,
Someone
interested in being a chair?
Pardon me?
I would ask the question, who's interested in acting as?
about you?
Was that a nomination, Fred?
For Dennis?
Dennis?
Sure, Kurt, do you have a point?
I do. So whoever is the chair, I mean, essentially, your responsibility will just be to coordinate the agenda with staff, then essentially facilitate these meetings much the way James is doing now. It wouldn't be expected that the chair is to be out recruiting people to speak and do stuff. The chair would coordinate with staff members with questions or things that they felt needed to be directed from those agendas. And we would work with the chair as well to craft that agenda, to present. I would say, so whoever the chair, this doesn't function much differently than many of our committees where we create the agenda, send a draft agenda to the chair, who the chair says, this is good, or change this, or whatever, and then we would do that work. So I don't want it to be, I don't want someone to have a sense that this would be something that would be an enormous undertaking as far as overseeing these meetings.
With that being said, I'll hold for nominations.
Or we could next meeting if you all want to talk about it amongst yourselves, and there'll probably be a fifth member if you want to do that, and James will just be forced to do this one more time.
I'm okay with that. If you guys seem like you're a little hesitant as far as the formation of what the committee's going to look like, I'll take it on one more time, August 5th, and then hopefully we can circle back and get somebody to take a couple of the seats. I think there's three. There's the chair, vice chair, and secretary. Is that right, Kurt?
It is. And so let's talk about this. The secretary position, I would not have the impression that secretary position would actually be taking the minutes. The role I would see the secretary taking is my hope here is to have Janelle, who does the board meetings, do this committee, that when she put draft minutes together, it could go out to the committee as a group, but with the secretary facilitating that review, especially to make sure that the minutes were reflective of what happened in that meeting. Not that the secretary would be sitting here furiously writing and typing things down to draft them themselves.
So it looks like that's the consensus of the four members, is to wait until the August 5th meeting until we possibly have a fifth member, and then kind of take it from there. Is that good with everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be good to have a little more dialogue maybe first.
Sure. Yeah, digest it, talk about, if you have each other's emails, and then maybe kind of just talk to everybody and see how everybody feels about it. So, all right, we'll skip through agenda items 4, 5, and 6 then, and we'll go right to 7, which is public comment. Is there anybody on the line for public comment? I'm sorry, Fred, did you have a question?
No, I think it would be a good idea for everybody to email their phone numbers as well. So if they want to call each other, we all have each other's emails. So if we could get your phone numbers as well, and then you guys could talk to each other voice and through email, and then on the 5th, we could probably move forward with the organization.
And for you all, if you see in that email, you'll see that my assistant Katie sent you those emails today to include Katie in there, so we can have a master list in the event like there needs to be a call or something. Okay.
Good point.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, so is there anybody on the line for public comment?
There's no public comment.
I don't see any other agenda items after that. We do have a meeting scheduled for August 5th. I will be spearheading that meeting, and hopefully we'll have a 5th member, and we'll be able to do some organization as far as the committee. Yes, Dennis?
Yeah, James, just while we're all gathered here, as part of the background, the objectives are clear. They're in the resolution. Could you and Fred maybe talk a little bit about the issues that the supervisors have that led to this formation? Like, what are the supervisors looking for? I know obviously it's some great ideas on reuses and things, but give a little more color commentary around the dilemma that the Board of Supervisors must have recognized that led to this formation, just to help our orientation a smidgen.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I know that, and Suzanne's not on this call, but Suzanne had really been somebody that came to me and said, hey, listen, we have this issue with these properties that are now starting to dilapidate. And, I think that the township recognizes that there's asset there. And I think it's trying to maximize, what asset is there and highest and best uses for those properties. The last thing you want to do is let buildings dilapidate, fall, when on your watch, when there's an opportunity to use them in a at least a break even, at least get some type of use, whether it's for community or whether it's for profit or whatever the case is. I think that's what the case is on this. Fred, I don't know if you want to elaborate on your position on that. You're on mute.
There you go.
So, yeah, I agree with what James said, but I also would like the committee to understand that, that the board wants to rehabilitate and find a use for these buildings, but we also have finite resources. And if you look at the list and the estimates on what's going to cost to renovate or replace these buildings, we are well over 7 figures. So, this committee hopefully will help us in forming not only a priority list, but a use list, so we can have funds to maintain the buildings in the future. It seems that in the past, we have bought properties and not had the money to maintain properties. We're trying to change that dynamic. We want to be able to fix repair, use them, provide sources of income to maintain them, so that they can be an asset for the township, for generations to come. And hopefully, this committee will be that catalyst to get us going forward.
And Kurt, I know you want to add to that.
Well, I do, but I also that, and then I want to add one more thing for the committee. So I'm clearly not a supervisor, but I get paid to listen to them. And I think, frankly, the dilemma that the board has had right? So if we take the Patterson Farm site, when I began here, we started to look at the site and have staff, and we realized, wow, well, the buildings have lead-based paint, right? There's lead, we tested the ground, there's lead-based paint on the ground. There were more costs than even the board would have been aware of. If you listen to people that say how those properties should be used or reused, and you asked 4 people, you'd get 4 different answers of everybody equally passionate about what they believe that vision should be. And I think for the board, and part of this, it's not just that we need to budget money and to rehabilitate them. That's part 1. And part 2 is even the harder part. You can fix it up, but I think that's to get direction. It was when we talked about the zoning. But I would like to add one more thing, James, here, if you wouldn't mind, regarding the committee. So this is where we are right now with the committees. And this is my first meeting with the committee to discuss this. So you'll have to bear with me for this description. Whether you all are aware or not, the board has been having these hybrid meetings, as all committees have been having for since about March of last year. The governor's directive with that emergency declaration has expired. The law changed where he's not legally entitled to renew it. So this is where we are. For committees, for the board, the law and the Sunshine Law requires that there is a public gathering point that is not virtual for people to come to. However, townships like Lower Makefield that are second-class townships can hold hybrid meetings, meaning we would still do this, but people could still come to the building, and we will integrate that where people could still participate from home, but that we offer them a gathering place. There is no requirement in the code or the Sunshine Law that board members or staff members have to be on site, although I suspect most of us will be. Board members can still participate virtually and still constitute a quorum for the meeting. Committees are a little different, and we have committees in the township that fall under that same requirement, that have to have a public gathering place. And so it's not just a committee, they're also boards. It's the Board of Supervisors, Zoning Hearing Board, the Planning Commission, the Environmental Advisory Council, and the Park and Rec Board. They have to provide a physical meeting place for people to come. Now, whether or not we do hybrid for all of those meetings, those are very labor intensive, and right off the bat, we will be doing hybrid meetings for the board, for the Zoning Hearing Board, and the Planning Commission that are upcoming. The board will be weighing in on whether or not to do any other hybrid meetings. For committees like this, you can keep these meetings entirely virtual if you want. They're not violating anything. There's still a public component. The Sunshine Law does not apply in terms of having to provide a physical meeting place. You all, maybe in your August 5th meeting, because we've already advertised it this way, will need to have a discussion as far as how you want to proceed with meetings. I think it's fair to say that we're not going to be doing hybrid meetings for 16 committees in the township. If you think you want to get together physically and meet, we will then have to make sure that we have the arrangements for the meeting room. This is sort of convenient in that you don't have to worry about other meeting schedule, except not scheduling a virtual meeting on top of someone else who's doing it. So I just wanted you all I figured you were here. That could also be something that you think about going into the next meeting as far as what your preference will be in terms of meeting. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Fred or James, but besides the chair, how else you want to go about those meetings? Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's really for the committee to kind of figure out, which way they would want to go forward with it. Obviously from a convenience standpoint, if you're not able to make a meeting physically, it would be nice to have, a virtual, you could be at a different location. So I don't know how that works for people's schedules. So there is flexibility in that. Yeah, it's something to give thought about.
And I think for the committee at this point, the board still hasn't made a decision on hybrid across the board. I don't think we'll be able to do it for every committee. So at this point, I think, if that does present itself, that's fine, that you all decide if you want one or the other. And if something happened that you said, well, let's stay virtual for now. That doesn't mean you'd have to do that for the duration. You would just, you could start that way and transition one way or another, however you wanted to do. We would just have to advertise accordingly prior to those meetings.
And Kurt, just to clarify it, you know, we've budgeted for this type of format through 2021, correct?
For the board,
For the BOS, not for committees.
correct.
Okay.
Now, for the board, I'm sorry, James, for the board's discussion though, that can certainly be something you all talk about, because in the end, this is more labor intensive than what we're doing. Because if we do hybrid, that means then we have to open the Board of Supervisor meeting and have that staffed, right? Because in the end, there's going to be that interaction. And again, that'll be for the board to discuss how far in you want to do that. But we can have that discussion at our next meeting, James and Brad, if you want. So that's for, okay. I'm sorry, Dennis.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know how the other committee members feel. I mean, my availability on August 5th was reliant upon this remote connection. I'm not really in Lower Makefield, and I'm very comfortable with this. I'm happy to meet in person if the schedules permit. One thing we might want to talk about, or maybe we can do this via email, is not a meeting of the committee, but rather to organize some tours of these properties. I know, Bert, you said that could be done one-on-one, and that's fine if we need to. But actually, if the committee of 4 or 5 could tour the properties all together, it would be a great opportunity for some interaction, exchange of ideas, you know, talk about the same thing at the same time. I see that as productive. It wouldn't be a meeting, but it would be a tour. And if the committee has a date, if we can come up with a date that works for everyone to be on site, that would be worth some time and effort to sort out.
Can I just point out that you can't tour the Janney house?
Right.
Because we have summer camp, we have kids on premises, and so Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, you can't get in. So just work around that.
It may not be every property. It may be as many as we can muster.
And it very well, that's a good point, Dennis. And it very well could be that if we went over to the golf course to look at the house over there, and you went to Patterson Farm, you know, and you got a sort of the aggregate view, and maybe and I'll be honest with you, the Satterthwaite house, we would not recommend that you all walk through. There are parts of it that, no, but I'm saying in the end, but it could be very well that you go around the perimeter, maybe you go in and look in a bit. And we could do is with Beth's point, clearly front and center, to have staff sort of, if you all pick a date, pick the properties that would make sense to allow you to get the most out of your time to do that. If you wanted 2 hours or whatever it was, we could sort of condense that down and make that worthwhile.
And quickly about the availability too, if we were going to have someone lead us through these places, would we be able to do it at, you know, after business hours or on the weekend? What does the availability look like for that?
Availability would be when you're available.
Sounds good.
We're here to help you. So like sometime between 6 and 6:15 a.m. every other Tuesday. No, whenever you want to do it, James. So whenever you want to do it.
And the one other thing I wanted to ask was about this 5th member being interviewed. What is the kind of earliest that we might be able to get in contact with them so we can maybe try to coordinate that meeting?
5 minutes after she's appointed.
No, I'm asking when might she be appointed? Like when's the date?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Fred or any of the other board members, but I would imagine that if she was being interviewed on the 21st, an appointment would be shortly after that. I think she would be eligible for he or she would be eligible for the August 5th meeting.
Or, I mean, if the board was so inclined, James, they could appoint her that night.
Correct, yeah.
You know, so right.
Which is usually what we do.
It's usually at the end when we go through appointments, unless there's some type of, you know, objection to the nominee, I would imagine that She would be readily available on the 22nd.
Great. That's what I wanted to clarify when we might want to email and try to set up a time for us to walk these properties.
Yeah.
You want to do it before August 5th?
That's what I'm thinking, at least for us to be able to look and see what we're dealing with before we even try to start talking about it. And that gives us ample time, right? About 2 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
And I'll put this out for you guys as well. If there's a limited availability that you all only have an hour or so and we needed to do part of them in phase 1 and then you met on the 5th and we had to do the rest on the 2nd, you know, I mean, whatever fits, whatever you all want to do.
What I can do is I'll put a couple of dates together, James, prior to the 5th, send them out to everybody. And then, you know, what works for the majority, then we'll coordinate it with Kurt and the team to get everybody out there. Hopefully, you know, you can get a consensus, at least 3 or 4 of you can make it out. And then we'll take it from there. Like Kurt said, if we can't get everybody out to see them before the 5th, maybe at least a big portion, probably the higher priority ones, Kurt, the ones that we probably want to get people out to.
Yeah, if you could shoot for the week of the 26th, I'm going away. So, not that I don't know the properties, but
you're going to be there. I just want to clear up. You're not going to be away the week of the 26th. You're going to.
I will be available again on the 26th.
Okay.
I'll clarify that.
Okay, I'll put some dates together for you guys, and then we'll coordinate it with Kurt.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good.
Has the Board of Supervisors established? I mean, they've got engineering recommendations. You've got Jim Majewski's total cost estimations for 2021 on these properties. Is there a prioritization scheme?
I mean, I would imagine
Rating system. Are you expecting us to come up with that, or have you had conversations about that?
There probably should be a consensus between this committee and the professionals at the township of what the hierarchy of restoration of these properties would be.
And when can we meet with those engineers? The 5th?
So again, so the engineer is only going to tell you what they saw when they looked at properties. You know, they're going to be making a recommendation on what you all should recommend. I mean, listen, I think it's fair to say that the most of the attention from the board and from staff, for reasons that are obvious, have to do with the Satterthwaite house. We have looked at that house. That is, you know, the prominence of that property and the understanding that it's in disrepair has been a focus. But the engineer and Mr. Majewski can talk about what's been examined with these properties, what the challenges are with these properties. But as far as, I don't think you guys are going to have to be out here on an island regarding a recommendation for prioritization. You have 2 board members here to assist with that. But I think this was part of the task that they wanted the committee to take a look at was, and how you prioritize, I think, is up for discussion as well, right? So.
I think part of what Kurt's talking about, Betty, is basically, yes, we have an understanding that there's going to be properties that are, you know, towards their end of their effective age. And those obviously from a physical, you know, deterioration standpoint, we want to examine, but we also want to examine on the exit strategy of those properties, how we're going to make those useful and make those, you know, from a financial standpoint, how are we going to offset some of the expenses of renovating those properties? What's the, you know, 5, 10, 15 year plan as far as the use of those properties? It'd be nice to just, you know, restore them. And then if they just sit there, it kind of defeats the purpose. So we really want to have some type of strategy. And that's where you guys come in as far as ideas for, you know, similar to what you're doing at Arts of Yardley. You know, what's a useful purpose for that building? How do we bring it back to life and actually have it, you know, be alive from a Monday through Friday standpoint? So I think that's the reason why, you know, you guys have all been picked to come up with those options to say, hey, here's a great, you know, plan for this afterwards. I think we all know which ones need the most work right now. It's what do we do with them after the work is done is equally as important.
I have another question, because one of the documents that was distributed this afternoon is the, let me get it right, is the agricultural assessment. And there's a carve out, I presume that's around the buildings. That's not covered, that's not protected. on the agricultural easement?
The buildings themselves, the old equine hospital, that is not protected.
I don't know that that's it.
Are you-
There's
Yeah.
an agricultural easement.
So Beth, let me just cut in, not to
We'll cut out.
So when Mr. Majewski's here, he will be able to
I'll
get
ask.
into great depth about all of that stuff. You'll find it's one of the things that is quite amazing about him is his ability to pull this stuff out without looking at notes or stuff. So he should be able to.
Yeah, he knows it.
And Bet, if you want as well, if you want to email me some questions you have about those things, I want to have Jim prepped for that meeting as well. If there's things that you want to make sure you cover or anybody on the committee, you know what we're going to talk about. That way he can come and get right to it with you all. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Which basically is that the agricultural easement does not include the buildings, or there wasn't, so that they're not covered, so they're not protected. But then what is it? The Slack House is on the historic, or what is it? It's a historic property. It's listed.
I don't know if it was given that specific designation through PHMC. I don't think that it has, but that's going to, again, be a discussion with Jim.
Okay.
This research. Okay.
The question is for Kurt or any liaisons. Is there a deadline? Is there a time horizon? When is the supervisor? I mean, this is open-ended, creative, analytical combination assignment. But what's our deadline?
I'm going to defer to Kurt on that. If it was me, I think that, and Fred would agree with this, and I'm pretty sure that Suzanne would agree with this. I think because of the current, physical status of some of these buildings, that time is of the essence, I guess, is the best way for me to answer that question. But I think, Kurt, you have a different or a different angle, I guess.
The resolution provides a date of a report delivered to the board by the first quarter of next year. Now, if the committee is eyeballs deep in work and stuff is happening, I don't think the board, especially since you have two liaisons, if it goes beyond that there's punishments for that. But I think that would be the benchmark to look to try to have a report to the board in the first quarter.
Thank you.
Well, actually, it calls for an initial presentation no later than September 1st. So either we need to address that right to the board that whether or not that's feasible at this point.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll speak for myself, and I think Fred will also agree with this. There's going to be some leniency as far as that. As far as that deadline, I think in September, I think that's kind of unrealistic based on the current path that we're going down. I think, first quarter of 2022 is probably a little bit more realistic. But, the sooner we can get out there, the sooner we can get eyes on what's going on, and the sooner we can start brainstorming with what a plan is for each individual building and exit strategies and long-term strategies for those buildings. I think the better it is. Once we get into the winter seasons, obviously the inspections of the buildings is probably not going to be something that's feasible. So we probably want to knock that out, I would say, within the next, 60 days, I would say, to get everybody or get the majority of everybody to go look at all of these properties. I think that's pretty reasonable. If anybody objects to that, just let me know and we can try to reassess that. But I think that, again, time is of the essence. I don't think they're getting any better. Right, Kurt?
You should do it in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
To get an inspection done, because otherwise we're not going to have anything to talk about.
That's a good point too. That's a fair point. Anything else, Kurt? You're good. Any other questions? Fred Weiss, do you want to add anything? You're good.
All I can say is I really appreciate this effort. I don't want to kid you, this is going to be a monumental task. And it's going to require a lot of thought, a lot of discussion between you. And the board is really counting on your recommendations. And we really want to see next year, third quarter, that we can actually have a plan in place or a preliminary plan in place to start restoring our buildings.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with that. I firmly think that it's the cornerstone of our community is, some of those historic buildings and the farm at Patterson. So I think it's really important for us to, make sure that we are making sure our diamonds are sparkling as people come into the township. So with that, if there's no other points, I will close the meeting and I will talk to you guys on August 5th. I'm going to send an email out to everybody with some available dates for on-site inspections. And if everybody, we can just kind of get a consensus or a general, at least 3 of you out to go do some on-site inspections, then that would be best.
We can do it more than once. So even if we had to do 2 in one group and 2 in another, schedules permitting, that's not a problem either. Don't feel pressure if you don't fit one date that everyone else can. We'll make special provisions for anybody that needs it.
I appreciate that, Kurt.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.